One of my favorite things about cycling, bike touring, bike packing, commuting, whatever it might be, is that every single bike is slightly different in some way, person to person. You can tell a lot about an individual just by taking a peek at their bike. I'm honestly addicted to it. I'm like a moth to a flame. When I see a rig parked outside of a grocery store, on some bike rack outside of a college, I gotta go check it out. I gotta see just kind of what that bike is like and maybe what kind of life it's had. This is what I've ridden on my most recent trip, which is the Great Divide mountain biking route. This is a trail that goes from Banff in Canada, following the Continental Divide roughly, all the way to the Mexican border in Antelope Wells, New Mexico. It is an incredible journey. I'm going to go through a bit of a series coming up where I'm going to do a deep dive on the bike that I took for that, the gear, some of the gear changes that I've made, my toolkit, and the bags that I use. This is the very first installment, which is going to be focused solely on my bike and the bike that I rode and some of the choices I make as far as my bike packing setup is concerned. This is a very informative video for anyone looking to get into bike packing, whether you're going to do the Great Divide mountain biking route or not. There's a ton of information coming your way about my preferences as a rider. I'm going to do a little bit of an unpacking of this bike and a couple of little caveats that I thought were really important for the Great Divide mountain biking route specifically. There's one thing that I think is extremely important after talking to lots of cyclists that you could upgrade on your ride that I'm going to touch on and really, really harp on at the end of this video. So stick around for that. If there's something you think is really important for the Tour Divide or bike packing, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear about it, honestly. And I have had a lot of really interesting things pop up in my personal life. Turns out if you leave the country for 3 years and just do a bunch of hiking and biking in New Zealand, there's a bunch of family stuff you got to take care of when you get home. Who knew? I've been dealing with a ton of that stuff, but I am working on a documentary about my experience on the Great Divide. I think it's going to be one of the coolest video projects I've ever done in my entire life. I'm really looking forward to releasing that. Unfortunately, it's way behind schedule. So it'll get out as soon as we can. I'm going to release these weekly moving forward, and we're going to try and get caught up on some of the stuff like my budget and some of my favorite parts of the Great Divide as I went on. So let's get into this bike and some of the things that I think are important to keep in mind when you are getting into your first or second or fifth bike packing build. Before I get into too many details about this bike, I want to point out initially and first and foremost, a lot of what I'm about to tell you doesn't really matter. This seems counterintuitive to why you're even in this video in the first place. But I see a lot of people out there, myself included, who've obsessed over tiny details about a bike. I thought for sure I was going to have to save up for a Salsa Fargo or a Cutthroat or some specialized super slack hybrid drop bar, mountain bike, combo, hybrid, whatever. There's so many variations of bikes out there in the world at this stage. It's honestly, frankly, a little bit overcomplicated. If you think that you don't have a perfect bike to do the Great Divide, you're probably right. Because there is no perfect bike for the Great Divide that exists. If you're going to go drop $3,000 to $5,000 on a brand new bike to get through a bike packing trip, and you can 100% afford that, by all means, go do it. I would do the same. I unfortunately can't afford to drop that level of cash on a bike, because if I do, I'm not going to be able to do the trip that I set out to do in the first place. I think it's really, really important that you look at the bike that you already have. And if you don't have a bike, look for some budget options. The paywall to get into bike packing can be quite high. So it's really important to note that the bike that you have probably isn't perfect, but you might be able to change a few things about it. I'm just going to talk about a couple of the components on this bike that I addressed for myself and I think are important things that you can address on your bike packing rig, short of buying a new bike. If that's going to stop you or prevent you from doing the trail in the first place, it's really counterintuitive to go out and spend $5-6 grand on a bike. For example, one of the guys that I rode with on the Great Divide who had just as much fun as everybody else, maybe even more at times, is riding his bike from Alaska all the way down to Argentina. This guy's name is Alex. He's got a YouTube channel called Cranking It. I would definitely suggest that you check that out. And he rode a bike that I would have considered not the right choice for the Great Divide. It is a very upright, classic touring setup with old school panniers, a rack, 26-inch wheels, and rim brakes. And he was fine. Ultimately, 9 out of 10 bikes could probably successfully complete this trail. I've saw very small tires down to the 40 range. I think even my old Trek sitting over there would be fine. I'm just going to touch on a couple of factors that I thought were extremely important when choosing a couple of new components or upgrading some components on the bike that you already have to get you through this. Okay, now that we got the red tape, my little rant out of the way, buy used bikes. That's what I'll say. Most importantly, buy used bikes, okay? Don't go buy brand new bikes. There's so many used bikes out there. The average bike gets 200 miles in the first year of its life, and then another 200 miles over the following 10 years. There's so many great deals out there. I bought this bike used. It's a Frankenstein bike that I bought in New Zealand. I nicknamed that thing the Keen Machine. This is not my first choice of bike for the Great Divide. I honestly was thinking about doing a custom build, steel, whatever. This just happened to be the bike that I had at the time, and it's the bike that I rode. I didn't have time to build a custom bike, nor did I have enough money. So I'm going to start here right up in the front. I have a Sun dynamo hub, as well as a Bush & Mueller light and a Sinewave Cycles charger. That's something that I don't think is too important for anyone out there who's considering doing their next bikepacking trip or the Great Divide. I just really, really, really wanted to have a Sun dynamo hub. The idea of them are amazing. I've got flat bars. I used to have bamboo bars, these really cool bamboo bars from New Zealand, but they broke along the way. And then I'm rocking a 1x10, which is not the ideal, in my opinion. I've got a 32 chain ring in the front and my 11x42 cassette in the rear. And I have the Shimano Dior group set for this. For the most part, I'm rocking the ass hammock, the legendary Brooks saddle. I've got disc brakes on this bike, and this is the Surly Midnight Special. It fits me for the most part. It's a steel bike, and it is probably one of their furthest bikes from a mountain bike in the lineup of Surly. I had initially 700C or 29-inch rims. I swapped it for 650B in order to fit a 55 mil tread on this bike, or by Renee Hurst, the Utanum Ridge, which is very similar to their Fleecer Ridge, which was helped design by Leo Wilcox, and the idea was for this route. And because I hate myself, I started this trail with tubes. I know. I received a lot of hate about this on the trail, after the trail, before the trail, and a lot of information about why that's probably not a great idea. But I figured I love changing tubes. Why would I stop today? My feelings about tubeless tires have greatly improved in the last 1 hour. Some of these build highlights here, and some of the feedback I have, some of the things that I thought I would change in the end. First and foremost, that tubeless thing, we changed it in the middle of the trail at a very inconvenient time. You're going to have to watch the documentary to figure out how that all went down. I really didn't like the tubes. I got my record number of flats in one day. That was a huge bummer. That's something I would definitely change for any person out there who's thinking about riding this trail with tubes. That's a horrible idea unless you're going to skip New Mexico. Moving forward, the Dynamo Hub. I thought the Dynamo Hub was great for me. I have a lot of touring that I want to do on this wheel set in the future. I think that a Dynamo Hub is perfect for me as a tourer. But if you're going to go out and spend a lot of money on a Dynamo Hub, your average speeds are not really high enough to get enough output to charge off this. So those days that I rode into the night late, it was really great to have a very bright headlight, this Bush & Mueller, but that charger, I don't think it was worth the money in the end. It's almost better to just carry another power bank to get you from town to town. Obviously my bamboo bars broke, and I did like having flat bars, but I'm not a flat bar person overall. Turns out I like drops more. I like having more hand positions. So I'm going to swap those out at some point for drops, because that's just how I tour. I know this is a hot take, but I would go for a 2x on this bike. Having a wider range of gears due to the mixed terrain, big downhills, lots of climbing, I would have liked to have just like a bit more higher low-end gears for this particular ride. So the 1x I know is quite trendy these days, and that's what I'm rocking, the 1x10. I would at least go to an 11 speed. And I think it's really important to note that no matter what you put on this bike, it's probably going to break in some capacity. I feel like bike maintenance is going to be a bit of a crux on this one, I'm realizing, because I've had a lot of mechanical issues already. It hasn't even been a full week. It's going to be scuffed, scratched. I have to probably paint this bike. If anyone has any advice on how to paint a bike or how to get that whole thing done, drop me a comment below, because I'm probably going to undertake that with this thing, because the paint is destroyed. It is no longer remotely in good condition. That leads me to one of the most important aspects of your ride as a whole is the foundation of your bike, which is the wheel set. Before you invest in a carbon frame or a carbon fork or anything else, I implore you to please invest in a really, really nice wheel set. It was the number one complaint I found from any cyclist out there on the trail, is that they had wheel or tire problems. One person had to replace their rear wheel 3 separate times. It's an astronomical investment, and when you lose an entire rim in the middle of nowhere, you are walking, hitching, calling, something. It's a bad day. Being able to accommodate a large tire size of at least 2 inches is really, really important because of the varied terrain and some of the sand. And something hand-built. These are some of the things that set a wheel aside from those pre-manufactured wheels. I went for a Velocity Blunt SS, which is on the lighter side. 32 spokes, 3 crossed. I have it laced into a Sun Dynamo hub and then a Velocity hub in the rear. And I got it hand-laced by Jay at Red Shed Cycles here in Rochester, Michigan. Excellent shop, really about the community, great dude. The fact that this is a hand-built rim makes it so much more durable and stronger than your typical machine-built tire. The only place I could really recommend someone to put some money into their bike before this trail is into their wheel set. More times than not, when I talk to a person about extreme mechanicals they had along the way, it was a rim problem. Lots of out of true, broken spokes, and I was lucky enough to make it through the entire trail without breaking a single spoke. I did have to get my wheels trued up one time, but that was it. Your wheels are going to take a beating, and in my opinion, that is the most important thing that you could address on your bike if you're going to go do the Great Divide mountain biking route. That is my bike, and my advice for you moving forward is that you just got to get out there and ride the bike that you have, and you will make changes. There's no such thing as a perfect bike. Do not blow all of your cash on a bike that you can't afford because you think you need it for the trail you want to do. Get out there and ride your bike. That's the most important thing. That's what we're all here to do. And I know that the rabbit hole, the gear rabbit hole, has gotten me a few times. So be careful when you're out there shopping around for bikes. Anyways, keep an eye out for that documentary about my journey on the Great Divide mountain biking route. I'm working diligently on getting that out to you as soon as I possibly can. It's going to be sweet. And keep an eye out for my bags and gear I'm going to be releasing over the coming weeks.